Good day, everyone. Trust you're doing well today. Today, we're talking about Femi Otedola's secret strategy and why he keeps winning. Have you ever noticed something strange about Femi Otedola? Most people say he became rich because of oil, and honestly, that sounds reasonable. After all, when most Nigerians hear Otedola's name, they immediately think about fuel and oil money. But personally, the more I studied his biggest moves over the last 20 years, the more I realized something surprising. I don't think oil was the business that made him so much money he has today. In fact, if you look closely, he may be doing something, much smarter. And if this observation is correct, right, it explains almost every major investment decision he has made so far. Now, it explains Forte Oil, it explains Geregu Power, it explains First Bank, and it may even explain why he wants to invest in Dangote Refinery. Because the real pattern is not oil, the real pattern is bottlenecks. Let me explain. Imagine Nigeria suddenly runs out of luxury watches. Life goes on because it's just watch. Imagine Nigeria stop buying expensive designer clothes. Life goes on. Imagine Nigerians stop buying the latest phones for 1 year. Life becomes uncomfortable for the individual, but life still goes on. Now imagine Nigerians suddenly have no fuel. Everything starts slowing down. Transportation suffers, businesses struggle, supply chain will break down. Now imagine no electricity as well. The economy will also suffer. Factories will suffer. Homes will suffer as well. Now imagine no banking system. Of course, people will not be able to transfer money. Businesses will not be able to borrow. Trade will become difficult. The entire economy will start feeling the pressure. Now, do you see the difference? Some industries are nice to have, others are impossible to live without. And that is where Otedola seems to focus his attention. He doesn't focus on trends or hype, not on whatever is popular this year, but on sectors that sit right in the middle of the economy, sectors that people cannot avoid. And once you start looking through that lens, his career starts making a lot more sense. Let's go back to where many people first noticed him, oil. Most people focus on the money he made from fuel, but what is interesting is not that he was involved in oil. It is where he positioned himself. He understood something very important. He understood that in many cases, controlling distribution can be more powerful than production. You don't always need to own the oil feed. Sometimes owning the path that the product travels through can be even more valuable. That understanding helped him build one of Nigeria's biggest fortune. But this is where things get interesting. Most business owners become emotionally attached to their biggest success. They spend years building a company. The company becomes part of their identity. Then they refuse to let go. Even when conditions change, even when better opportunities appear. But Otedola seems different. When he sold Fort Oil, many people were surprised. Personally, I was surprised as well. So people thought he was walking away from the thing that made him famous. But what if he wasn't leaving? What if he was simply moving his capital to the next opportunity? This is a completely different way of thinking. Most investors ask, how long can I hold this asset? Otedola seems to ask, where can my next naira earn the highest return? Those two questions are not the same. And that difference changes practically everything. Now, after oil came power, which is, energy. Now, think about that for a second. Nigeria's electricity sector has always been challenging. Many investors stay away because they see problems. But successful investors often look at problems differently. They ask, if this problem gets solved, who benefits the most? Otedola looked at electricity and saw something many others, saw as too difficult. A country with, huge demand, a country with, not enough supply. And whenever demand is much bigger than supply, opportunities often appear. That led him into Geregu power. Over time, the value of the business increased. The market started recognizing that value. And then something happened that fits the same pattern again. He sold. Once again, he built value, unlocked value, and then moved capital. At this point, it started looking less like luck and more like a system. Then came banking. Think about what sits at the center of almost every economy: money. Businesses need loan, workers receive salaries, companies move capital, families save money, banks touch almost every part of economic activities. So when Otedola built a major position in First Bank's parent company and eventually became chairman, I don't think it was a random decision. I think it follows the same pattern. Find an essential sector, find a strategic position, build influence, wait patiently, then create value. And if you think that's where the story ends, well, think again. Because recently, another pieces of that puzzle appeared: Dangote Refinery. Now, this is where the pattern becomes very clear. Many investors would have said, I've already made money from energy. But Etodola appears to see energy differently. It seems to focus on different parts of the value chain. First, fuel distribution, then electricity generation, then banking, and now refining. Notice something important. These are not ordinary businesses. These are economic choke points, places where large amount of economic activity flow through. And that brings us to what may be the biggest lesson from his career. The lesson is not to copy his investment, right? The lesson is to copy his thinking, because most people spend their time asking, what stock should I buy? This is often the wrong question. A better question is, what sector will people absolutely need 10 years from now? That changes your focus. Another useful question is, where is demand growing faster than supply? That is where bottlenecks appear. And bottlenecks can create enormous, opportunities. Then ask yourself, is everyone already excited about this opportunity? Because if everyone already sees it, a lot of the upside may already be gone. The biggest gains often happen before the crowd arrives, not after. There is another lesson hidden inside Otedola's story, and I think this is the lesson many people miss: concentration. Most retail investors spread money across dozens of stocks, sometimes hundreds. They know a little about everything, but many wealthy investors take the opposite approach. They spend a huge amount of time understanding a small number of opportunities. Then they make meaningful bets when they find something they truly believe in. Of course, concentration increases risk, right? But it also increases potential reward. That is why conviction matters a whole lot. Not blind confidence, by the way. Not blind confidence. Conviction based on understanding. And there is one final lesson, possibly the most important lesson of all, which is capital allocation. The ability to move money from one good opportunity into better opportunities. This is harder than it sounds, right? Most people either sell too early or hold too long. But the best capital allocators constantly ask themselves, if I receive all my money back today, would I put it right back into this investment? If the answer is no, then move. That appears to be one of Otedola's greatest strengths. Not simply buying, not simply holding, but knowing when to simply rotate his capital, knowing when one chapter is ending, and knowing where the next opportunity may be hiding. So when people say Femi Otedola became rich because of oil, I think that explanation is too simple. Oil was part of the story. Power, which is energy, right, was part of the story. Banking is part of the story. Refining may become part of the story. But underneath all those investments seems to be the same idea. It starts by finding the sectors a country cannot function without. Find the bottlenecks, gain meaningful influence, wait patiently while value grows, then move capital into the next strategic opportunity. And if that really is the formula, the pattern, then the most valuable thing Otedola owns may not be an oil company, a power company, or a bank shares. It may be his ability to see where the next bottleneck is before everyone else does. And that skill is far more valuable than any single investment. So going forward, you should start, seeing investments like Otedola, think like him, and apply his methodology. in the stock market. If you gain value from this video, please like and subscribe so you do not miss my next video. All right. Have a nice day. Bye.